With the WINN FM News, I am Kevin Brown.
And I am Yolana Weeks.
Our top stories. IMF report signals modest recovery for St. Kitts and Nevis amid persistent fiscal challenges.
St. Kitts and Nevis' Hassani MacDonald and Carice Elliott joined the 2025 United Nations Youth Advisory Group on climate change. Influential figures bring positive messages to students of Tucker Clark Primary School.
St. Kitts schools unite for landmark day of interruption to combat violence. St. Lucia's investment minister accuses opposition leader of attempting to imperil the Citizenship by Investment program in the country. CARICOM Foreign Affairs ministers seek clarification on U.S. visa policy. Internationally, European leaders back Zelensky after Trump clash. Now, the details. The latest IMF staff report issued on February 26, 2025 paints a cautiously optimistic picture for the country. Building on assessments from the 2022, 2023, and 2024 country reports, the findings suggest a modest economic rebound driven by a revived tourism sector and significant strides in renewable energy, even as fiscal and structural challenges persist. St. Kitts and Nevis Prime Minister, the Honourable Dr. Terence Drew, addressed the IMF mission to the Federation during the February 27, 2025 sitting of the National Assembly.
The World Bank has sent its analysis, which is now with the FS, which will have discussions with the Nevis Island administration so that we can flesh out properly how we will set up the mechanism to make sure that the sharing of revenues, whether tax or non-tax, that is totally transparent and open so that there is no question as to who gets what is the unfair sharing, but there should be equity. Equity, of course, takes into account difference in population and so forth, but nonetheless, it is critically important that there is equity and that nobody is shut out. Neither St. Kitts as an island nor Nevis as an administration should be shut out of what should be a transparent way of sharing revenue. So I wanted to highlight that.
After years of grappling with sluggish productivity and external vulnerabilities, the nation is forecast to experience growth of 2% in 2025, up from 1.5% in 2024. While the medium-term growth outlook is projected at 2.5%, the IMF staff underscored that this recovery hinges on continued progress in the tourism and renewable energy sector. In particular, the geothermal project, now nearing its drilling phase with secured funding, represents a critical component of the country's energy transition strategy. The report highlights that the current account deficit widened to 15% of GDP in 2024, up from 12% in 2023, reflecting pressures from declining citizenship by investment inflows and expanding fiscal deficits. Echoing themes from previous years, the 2022 and 2023 reviews had warned of vulnerabilities stemming from an over-reliance on volatile revenue streams. In 2024, the fiscal deficit reached 11% of GDP, driven by a sharp drop in CBI revenue. This trend is expected to moderate slightly to 9% in 2025. However, public debt is on an upward trajectory. It is projected to rise to 61% of GDP this year and potentially 68% by 2030. IMF staff continue to urge a robust fiscal consolidation program to steer public debt below the regional ceiling of 60% of GDP. The current report echoes recommendations from previous assessments, emphasizing the need for tax reforms, expenditure control, and institutional strengthening. Establishing a sovereign wealth fund to buffer fiscal shocks and manage volatile CBI revenues is also advocated. This measure builds on recommendations made in past reviews.
The other thing I wanted to highlight, Madam Speaker, is the matter to do with the Sovereign Wealth Fund. I want to thank the IMF for the work it has done. It has sent the framework for us to set up that Sovereign Wealth Fund. It is critically important because it's going to help to transform us into a sustainable island state and make us more resilient. That Sovereign Wealth Fund, had it been in place, the money that was in the SIDF, the nearly $500 million that was spent out of the SIDF without the people knowing, that money could have been placed in the Sovereign Wealth Fund. And that money could have been used in a more strategic way where you maintain the fund and you were able to raise significant revenues to different types of actions.
Drew Lambast said the former administration for what he describes as squandering the SIDF.
Instead, all the money has gone down the drain and we were not told how the money was spent. That is a travesty. Madam Speaker. That hurts deeply. How could we have spent over $400 million and not tell the people that that money was being spent? That is, of course, I will leave that there, but just to let you know that for the first time, we will have a sovereign wealth fund set up. So we are establishing, Madam Speaker, the foundation of the new St. Kitts and Nevis, an economy, a country that will be more resilient and can stand up to shocks.
While bank credit growth accelerates by 11% year over year, mainly due to the expansion of mortgage and consumer lending, the financial sector remains at risk. The report notes that although non-performing loans are on a downward trend overall, they still pose a threat, particularly to credit unions, whose delinquency ratios have climbed to 10%. This rapid credit expansion, reminiscent of trends highlighted in the 2023 assessment, suggests that while profitability and capital adequacy have improved, vulnerabilities could be exacerbated by global financial instability or a downturn in key tourism markets. Despite near-term risks ranging from commodity price volatility to the ever-present threat of natural disasters, the report outlines several promising avenues for sustained economic improvement. The renewable energy initiatives, notably the geothermal project and a new renewable-powered desalination plant, could bolster energy security and generate additional fiscal revenue over the medium term. As government officials pledge to implement fiscal and structural reforms, the lessons drawn from the 2022 to 2024 assessments appear poised to inform a strategy to achieve long-term economic stability and resilience. The authorities have signaled a commitment to tightening fiscal policies, enhancing transparency, and diversifying revenue sources to ensure the modest recovery is sustainable and inclusive. The IMF report on St. Kitts and Nevis is available on the IMF website. It provides a complete account of the IMF's findings and detailed policy recommendations.
The St. Kitts National Youth Parliament Association's president, Hassani MacDonald, and Carice Elliott, a climate advocate and a sustainable fashion designer, were selected as members of the 2025 United Nations Youth Advisory Group. Also an attorney at law, MacDonald is dedicated to youth empowerment and environmental advocacy and often takes the lead in initiatives like youth debates, forums, and community outreach. As a policy officer and community leader, Elliott champions the sustainable tourism, climate education, and environmental initiatives. Through her brand, Impressive Designs, she creatively merges fashion with sustainability. MacDonald and Elliott, natives of St. Kitts and Nevis, joined the third cohort with other young successful and innovative leaders from across the Caribbean. The cohort will serve from 2025 to 2027. The United Nations Youth Advisory Group will be the voice of the youth from respective territories and regions, sharing experiences and viewpoints and providing recommendations and advice to the United Nations Secretary General on climate matters. MacDonald and Elliott's selection to the United Nations Youth Advisory Group comes at a time when Caribbean countries are asked to play their part to ensure that global warming is kept below 1.5 degrees Celsius. The United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres, speaking to the youth, once said, quote, "My generation has largely failed until now to preserve both justice in the world and to preserve the planet. It is your generation that must make us accountable to make sure that we don't betray the future of humankind," unquote. The students of Tucker Clark Primary School were encouraged to avoid a life of crime and violence in a powerful message by Pastor Winsroy Duport. Pastor Duport visited the school on Wednesday, February 26, for the Day of Interruption, a nationwide student intervention program against crime and violence organized by the Citizen Security Task Force in collaboration with the government of St. Kitts and Nevis.
Let me say from the outset that crime and violence is a devilish thing. It's a bad thing. It's a wrong thing. It's not of God. So do not even try to start to think about committing any crime. Now, crime and violence and crime are related. You can commit a crime and it can lead to violence, and you can commit violence and it leads to a crime or crime.
The pastor delivered the message based on the text Exodus 20:13, which says, "Thou shalt not kill."
Exodus, that's the second book in the Bible, chapter 20 and verse 13 declares that thou shalt not kill, same as thou shalt not murder. And so, because I'm going to be very short and I want certain things to remain with you, to take a gun with bullets in it and shoot and kill someone, that is murder. You have murdered someone, or anyone who did that or have intention of doing it, God forbid, that will be murder. You cannot take another man's life. That is why the word of God is saying, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt do no murder. Now, that is just one form of murder. If you take up a knife, or even a machete cutlass, and you stab up and you chop up someone, and you kill them, that is murder.
It is often said that the people who you choose to associate yourself with determine a lot about where you are going in life. Pastor Duport admonished the students to avoid spending time with people who are toxic or negative and focus on building friendships with people who are positive, supportive, and uplifting. Guest speaker, Mr. Genevieve Mills, had an interactive discourse with the students. Some of the key takeaways from his presentation are that everyone is different, everyone must give something positive to society, and hate is heavy. Mills also encouraged the students to give 100% to God. Meanwhile, inmates of His Majesty's prison also visited the school and gave the students a lesson about poor decision-making. Sharing a snapshot of their lives and the consequences of their actions, they aimed to deter another child from making poor decisions as they did that can lead to imprisonment.
I never used to listen, and I developed some bad habits, and now I have to bear the consequences of those decisions. Now, even though I'm in prison for one event, that one event started somewhere. That one event started from when I was, as I say, you guys' age, and even though I felt like, as I said, I don't have to think about life, because my parents gonna give me food and the teacher's gonna talk and I ain't really gonna take them on. But that behavior and that mindset is what led basically all of us to where we are right now, incarcerated. And now I can do anything what I wanted to do when I used to like do everything I wanted to do. But if I had focus, as some of you are, I hope, if I was focused at that moment in life, then I might have been speaking here as the Prime Minister instead of an inmate at His Majesty's prison. So, as I said, you guys are not too young because you can understand what I'm saying, which means that you have understanding. Yes. So, therefore, use your understanding to develop yourself and better yourself, because you, as I said, are not too young to have an impact, whether even at home, in school, or society. So, as I said, please start to focus, start to create goals, start to work towards your goals, take your education seriously. There are people inside the prison who are 30 odd years and can't even spell their names. So I don't want to see that happening anymore. I don't want to see people growing up and not knowing basically basic education and such. So education really, really, really is important.
The island of St. Kitts successfully hosted a historic day of interruption on February 26, 2025, bringing anti-violence messaging to all primary and secondary educational institutions across the Federation. The coordinated initiative saw simultaneous school assemblies throughout St. Kitts, with community leaders delivering powerful messages encouraging students to reject violence and embrace peaceful alternatives. According to the Honorable Senator Iseline Phillip, Minister responsible for Social Development and Gender Affairs, The event presents a strategic expansion of the 90-day anti-violence campaign launched in September 2024. During her address to the National Assembly on February 27th, Senator Phillip explained,
"The Day of Interruption is a deliberate and intentional initiative which was taken as part of the public health approach to crime and violence that this administration is committed to undertaking to be able to identify long-term solutions to the increases in crime and violence that we've been seeing."
The initiative mobilized an impressive cross-section of community volunteers who served as motivational speakers at school assemblies. These included entertainers, pastors, medical professionals, politicians across party lines, counselors, social media influencers, current and reformed prisoners, and law enforcement officers. This diverse presentation underscored the all-of-society approach being implemented.
I think people recognize that we all need to take some level of responsibility, and this does require partnerships as an all-of-society approach.
Senator Phillip confirmed that the neighboring island of Nevis will conduct its Day of Interruption on March 11th, 2025.
The Nevis Island Administration, through the Premier's office, is also committed to executing the same on Nevis at a time that is convenient for the schedule of the Ministry of Education there.
She stated, encouraging Nevis residents to support the upcoming event when volunteers are called upon to participate. In regional news, St. Lucia's investment minister accuses opposition leader of attempting to imperil the Citizenship by Investment program in the country. HDS News Force St. Lucia reports.
But there was something different in this filing. There was something slightly different. When you read his affidavit and all the statements he made, it is about St. Lucia suffering now. It's about destroying St. Lucia now.
Opposition leader Alan Chasney has restarted legal action against St. Lucia's Citizenship by Investment (CIP) officials, continuing the legal challenge initiated by MSR Media's Philippe Martinez. Investment Minister Dr. Ernest Hilaire criticizes the move as a politically motivated attack on the island's investment framework.
So there it is. He took a lot of what Martinez said, Martinez, his good friend, and filed a case in St. Lucia, almost repeating the things Martinez said, and then circulates it all over the world. So this is global. People hearing about St. Lucia, and he's going to court to make the court stop. Listen to this: stop the infrastructure option, and to revoke every citizenship given. He's asking the court to stop the Galaxy project, stop approving files for Galaxy, and revoke everybody who's gotten citizenship. Now, why would you want to do that?
Hilaire insists the injunction filed by Chasney aims to undermine the progress of St. Lucia's CIP under the St. Lucia Labour Party (SLP) administration.
Why? So people out there now are hearing their citizenship probably will be revoked. What does that cause? Concern about St. Lucia, loss of faith in St. Lucia. That's what it's about. It's about destroying the reputation of St. Lucia. Why do you want to destroy the infrastructure program? It's a simple reason. If the Labour Party is in a position to implement the infrastructure projects and develop the roads and bridges and community infrastructure, he will pay the price at the polls in his mind. So he needs to stop it. If he stops the Galaxy project and the program stops making money from government fees, then government revenue is affected. There's only one intent in this case, and that is to hurt St. Lucia and hurt St. Lucians.
Hilaire urges residents to speak out, warning that Chasney's legal challenge threatens St. Lucia's CIP and could have devastating consequences for the island's development.
You go into a court case, you go in filing a case to virtually stop the country from being able to have a CIP program which brings benefit to the country. Why? What is going to happen that in your mind it is so necessary for you to stop it. So already you're seeing stories in St. Kitts that all the agents are running to St. Kitts. And I'm asking, which agents are running to St. Kitts? Where did that come from? And you hear in Associate Times speaking about St. Lucia program has fallen and people are moving away from St. Lucia. But that's the headlines they want all over the world, that the St. Lucia program is not a program to be associated with. When everybody knows we have been the torchbearers in terms of due diligence, in terms of management and process, and not just under us. I disagreed with some of the changes he made, but at no time would I stand up and say, no time, that in the management of the unit was there anything untold that we could point to. The management of the unit, I cannot, and I will be lying if I say so. I didn't agree with his changes. I didn't agree with the policies he had. But he really wants to destroy the program and destroy St. Lucia. That's what it is.
Hilaire rallies the public to reject what he calls a deliberate attempt to derail St. Lucia's progress, stating the nation's development depends on the court's decision regarding the injunction sought by Chasney. Solange Alfred, HTS News Force.
CARICOM Foreign Affairs ministers seek clarification on U.S. visa policy. Grenada Broadcasting Network has that story.
Grenada's Foreign Affairs Minister Joseph Andal, who participated in the CARICOM Council for Foreign and Community Relations meeting, that's the COFCO meeting on Friday, said the ministers agreed to write to the U.S. State Department to seek clarification about the statement which was issued on Tuesday by U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio. The COFCO meeting was held to discuss the Trump administration's decision to revoke visas of foreign government officials whose country employ Cuban doctors and nurses. In a statement on Tuesday, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said the expanded restrictions target individuals and immediate family members of individuals believed to be responsible for the program, which he described as forced labor. The statement reads, and I quote, "Today, we announce the expansion of an existing Cuba-related visa restriction policy that targets forced labor linked to the Cuban labor export program. This program policy applies to current or former Cuban government officials and other individuals, including foreign government officials, who are believed to be responsible for or involved in the Cuban labor export program, particularly Cuba's overseas medical missions. This policy also applies to the immediate family of such persons." End of quote. Andal said, foreign ministers felt the statement, as issued, needs some clear specification, and it was agreed that CARICOM ministers should seek clarification and at the same time request a meeting with U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio. No deadline was set because we cannot dictate the schedule for him, but we all agreed that such a meeting should be with the highest level, and that is, meeting with him, Andal noted. The meeting will be arranged by COFCOR. Andal stated that in the meantime, Grenada will continue to honor its health agreement with Cuba. We have an agreement with Cuba, and we will continue to respect the terms and conditions. We expect to continue that relationship with Cuba, and if anything, we will cross that bridge when we get to it, Mr. Andal added. COFCOR is a CARICOM body that coordinates foreign policy and promotes cooperation among member states. Grenada over the years has signed agreements with the Cuban government that provide for doctors and nurses to render their services through medical missions. Through the health agreements, hundreds of medical personnel from Cuba have contributed and continue to contribute to Grenada's public healthcare system. For GBN News, Janelle Dick.
We now bring you these international reports.
President Zelensky is preparing to travel to London for a summit of European leaders on Sunday after he clashed with President Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance in an extraordinary shouting match on a visit to the Oval Office. President Trump accused the Ukrainian leader of gambling with World War III and of not being grateful for the support of the US. President Zelensky made it clear there should be no compromises with President Putin. Following all that drama, the president of Ukraine was ordered to leave the White House and a much-anticipated minerals deal was not signed. The US president later said President Zelensky could return when he was ready for peace. Our North America editor Sarah Smith has this report.
Donald Trump began the day confident he was about to sign a very advantageous deal with Ukraine. These kind of events are all very carefully planned and they usually do stick to the script. You sit down in the Oval Office with all of the accompanying press, where the conversation starts with pleasantries, sometimes even a little joke.
And I do like your clothing, brother.
Yeah, really? There are obvious tensions. President Zelensky wants security guarantees from America that Donald Trump says are not on offer. But it was a jibe from a reporter about Mr. Zelensky's outfit that actually set the aggressive tone.
Why don't you wear a suit? You're at the highest. Why don't you wear a suit? You're at the highest level in this country's office, and you refuse to wear a suit. Just want to see people. Do you own a suit?
Yeah, problems.
A lot of Americans have problems with you not respecting the dignity of this office.
I will wear a costume after this war will finish.
Okay.
He was accused of being disrespectful in his dress and in his attitude, for refusing to agree to what Donald Trump thinks a peace deal in Ukraine should look like, for explaining his fears for his country.
And do you think that it's respectful to come to the Oval Office of the United States of America and attack the administration that is trying to prevent the destruction of your country?
A lot of questions. Let's start from the beginning. Sure. First of all,
this is the moment a disagreement became a full-blown fight. Donald Trump is clearly furious, and you'll see the two leaders start angrily talking over each other, fingers pointing, tempers fraying.
Don't tell us what we're going to feel. We're trying to solve a problem. Don't tell us what we're going to feel.
I'm not telling you.
Because you're in no position to dictate that.
That's
Remember
exactly
this. You're in no position to dictate what we're going to feel. You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III. If you didn't have our military equipment, this war would have been over in 2 weeks.
In 3 days. I heard it from Putin. In 3 days. This is something
maybe
new.
Less.
In 2 weeks. Of course, yes.
It's going to be a very hard thing to do business like this.
They obviously cannot agree on a ceasefire like this, with Donald Trump as angry as he has ever appeared in public. Volodymyr Zelensky refusing to back down, enraging the American president even further. They may never agree on whether Vladimir Putin can be trusted to stick to the terms of any deal.
She's asking, what if Russia breaks the ceasefire?
What if anything? What if a bomb drops on your head right now? Okay? What if they broke it? I don't know. They broke it with Biden because Biden, they didn't respect him. They didn't respect Obama. They respect me. You're either going to make a deal or we're out. And if we're out, you'll fight it out. I don't think it's going to be pretty, but you'll fight it out. But you don't have the cards. But once we sign that deal, you're in a much better position. But you're not acting at all thankful. And that's not a nice thing. I'll be honest, that's not a nice thing. All right, I think we've seen enough. What do you think? Huh? This is going to be great television, I will say that.
They were then meant to sit down and enjoy a working lunch before signing a deal that had already been agreed to allow American access to critical mineral mining in Ukraine. Instead, President Zelensky was instructed to leave the White House. Donald Trump posted on social media, "I've determined that President Zelensky is not ready for peace if America's involved, because he feels our involvement gives him a big advantage in negotiations." He disrespected the United States of America in its cherished Oval Office. He can come back when he's ready for peace. As he got ready to leave, the cameras lined up, ready to catch Mr. Zelensky being expelled from the White House. He knows he needs American backing to fight the war. He needs American support to get what he wants in any peace deal. Right now, he's made an enemy of the one man he really needs as an ally. Sarah Smith, BBC News, Washington.
So how has this exchange been viewed in Kyiv? Here's the take of our Ukraine correspondent, James Waterhouse.
This leaves Ukraine having to fight on. There is no respite from the day-to-day full-scale invasion it continues to combat. If you look at Donald Trump, perhaps suggesting the door is still open, perhaps if you look at President Zelensky still thanking America after that extraordinary exchange, perhaps there is still some collaborating to be done down the line. But it increasingly feels like this was less to do with a mineral deal. For President Zelensky, this was about trying to entice America into a deeper level of cooperation. And clearly, this proposal, this contract, wasn't as enticing for Kyiv as perhaps the White House was suggesting. We thought that America had dropped its demand for $500 billion worth of natural minerals. And we thought that perhaps, ahead of President Zelensky's departure from here, that maybe America was going to, in turn, provide the security guarantees, the military promises it wants to prop up any ceasefire in the future. Because what Ukraine and Europe agree on is that they still need America to be there in case this war was to reignite. But at the moment, it seems you have a White House refusing to commit to that, despite lengthy diplomatic efforts over the course of this week. And you saw a President Zelensky there seemingly having to stand his ground. I mean, the people you speak to here in Kyiv, we spoke to a couple last night, they were pleased. They thought President Zelensky had no choice. There are some MPs who felt he could have been a bit more tactile in the face of a verbal attack by the President and Vice President of the United States. But broadly speaking, there's a rule in Ukraine, there's a pattern. Whenever the country is under threat, be it from the invasion or whether it's President Zelensky himself, it fuels a political unity where you'll have his most fierce political rivals. And they don't hold back in Parliament. There is a deep division on domestic issues like mobilisation, for example. But in these periods, there is unity because the country does not want to appear divided, not least in the face of Russia.
James Waterhouse there for us in Kyiv. Well, European leaders have been rallying behind Ukraine, expressing their full backing of Kyiv's efforts to repel Russia's invasion. The British Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, fresh off his own visit to the White House, spoke to both President Trump and President Zelensky. A spokesperson said Sir Keir retains unwavering support for Ukraine and is doing all he can to find a path forward to a lasting peace based on sovereignty and security for Ukraine, adding that the Prime Minister looks forward to hosting an international leaders summit on Sunday, including President Zelensky. A string of other US allies, including France, Germany and Poland, also issued statements of support. The French President Emmanuel Macron said on X that there is an aggressor, Russia, and there is a victim, Ukraine. Prime Minister of Poland, Donald Tusk, wrote, "Dear Zelensky, dear Ukrainian friends, you are not alone." Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau offered his support, writing that Canada will continue to stand with Ukraine and Ukrainians in achieving a just and lasting peace. Meanwhile, President Trump was praised by Hungary's Prime Minister Viktor Orban, who said that the US leader stood for peace. And former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev applauded Mr. Trump, calling President Zelensky an insolent pig who got a proper slapdown.
So we're looking to do a deal with Ukraine with their rare earth.
Trump wants rare earths.
Rare earth elements are not actually rare.
Well, there's been a lot of talk recently about rare earths, and there's also a lot of confusion about the term.
Rare earth minerals are used in almost every technology you can think of. They're present in cell phones, medical devices, wind turbines, weapons, and much more. But what are they, and why are they important? And are they actually rare?
So the term rare earth elements, it refers to 17 chemically similar elements within the lanthanide series.
This is Professor Julie Michelle Klinger, a geographer and senior visiting fellow at the Institute for Human Sciences.
So if you can picture the periodic table, it's that bar at the bottom. Elements 57 to 71, plus scandium and yttrium.
Reuters special correspondent on commodities, Eric Onstadt, has a bit of the history.
The elements were first discovered by a Swedish miner in 1787 near a village called Ytterby, and that gives two of the elements their names, yttrium and ytterbium. There's another one called promethium, named after the Greek god that supposedly stole fire from the gods to give it to humans. China is by far the dominant producer. They account for 60% of mine production and 90% of processed rare earths. But interestingly, this wasn't always the case. In the 1980s, for instance, the United States was the biggest producer, And Europe had one of the biggest processing plants in the world.
They're often described as the vitamins or the spice of industry because they have enabled our technologies to get smaller and faster and stronger and more resilient.
Elements like lanthanum and cerium, some of the most common rare earths, are used in TVs and lighting, while the application of erbium and yttrium can range from nuclear power to lasers.
There are two broad categories that have really got the spotlight. The first one is military uses, and that can be from night goggles to precision missiles to radar. And of course, that is a very sensitive issue for nations wanting to guard their access to those kind of minerals. The second area is regarding the energy transition, and there are 4 specific rare earths that are used to make super strong permanent magnets that are used in motors for electric vehicles and for wind turbines. So that is key for most nations' zero carbon targets and cutting greenhouse gases.
It's really because of the challenges, the heavy energy and resource and pollution risks that are associated with refining rare earth elements, that production has concentrated historically in so few places.
Processing rare earths often involves the use of solvents, which can produce toxic waste. More environmentally friendly technologies are being developed, but they are not yet widely used.
The other issue is that some rare earth deposits are radioactive. They include uranium and thorium, and so some countries are not interested in having that be mined in their country.
But are they actually rare? Not really.
They are found all over the world, and in terms of the deposits, no, they are not actually rare. What's rare about them is sometimes they're found in very small quantities, and in addition to that, they're mixed with all kinds of other minerals. The difficulty is sometimes extracting each single rare earth from all the other minerals that are involved in the deposit.
U.S. stocks ended higher after a choppy trading session on Friday, with the Dow gaining about 1.4% and the S&P 500 and Nasdaq both climbing roughly 1.6%. It was a significant reversal for Wall Street's main indexes, which had turned lower after U.S. President Donald Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky clashed in an extraordinary exchange before the world's media at the White House over the war with Russia. Robert Conzo, CEO and managing director of the Wealth Alliance, said the verbal battle rattled investors already on edge about a number of economic factors, including the effect of Trump's tariffs and the direction of interest rates.
So the name of the game here, and this was a perfect example of it, is uncertainty. People were not expecting that exchange on any level to happen like that. The fact that it does is basically how his presidency has been going ever since. Things come out in 3 seconds and change the game. Uncertainty reigns supreme today.
Earlier in the day, a Commerce Department report showed inflation rose in January in line with expectations. However, consumer spending in January fell for the first time in nearly 2 years, potentially complicating the Federal Reserve's deliberations on monetary policy. Among Friday's stock moves, Dell dropped more than 4.5% after the PC maker forecast a decline in its adjusted gross margin rate for fiscal 2026. Peer HP fell nearly 7% after its quarterly profit forecasts missed expectations. And shares of Nvidia and Tesla rose almost 4% each, recovering some ground after a dismal week for both stocks.
You were listening to the WINN FM 98.9 newscast. Our top stories were: IMF report signals modest recovery for St. Kitts and Nevis amid persistent fiscal challenges.
St. Kitts and Nevis's Hassani MacDonald and Carice Elliott joined the 2025 United Nations Youth Advisory Group on climate change. Influential figures bring positive messages to students of Tuckaklack Primary School.
St. Kitts schools unite for landmark day of interruption to combat violence. St. Lucia's investment minister accuses opposition leader of attempting to imperil the citizenship by investment program in the country. CARICOM Foreign Affairs ministers seek clarification on U.S. visa policy. Internationally, European leaders back Zelensky after Trump clash.
Thank you for listening.